Okay, I want to talk a little bit about Dennis Smith, but I guess we could say like Cole is going to be featured on Bod Pod episodes when Dave isn't busy, Adam doesn't have people in his house, Dan is not an asshole, and James is not drunk. So, anyways, like, welcome to the crew. But this is all Many Ballin' because I just told Dan to call me when he was done doing whatever he was doing, and he just like didn't do that,
That's how it goes.
So, but like, it's always really great talking to you. It's also really great. I talked to Sean the other day from Ode to Odin for 2 hours straight. You guys are a couple really smart guys. You started the Stepien, and it's super cool. So everyone should go check out the Stepien. Talk about that a little bit. I'm just going to move audio around so that this is the intro here.
Sure. We're really excited. The Stepien is just, we're going to cover, like, it's going to be a one-stop kind of draft hub, cover high school, college, NBA prospects. Today, for example, I wrote about Ben Simmons, his current impact, and kind of how he has to meet, like what steps he has to do to reach his ceiling outcome in the future. So it was kind of a 19-minute read, I think, just video breakdowns, stat breakdowns. We cover a lot of different stuff. You'll see kind of similar styles to Draft Express as far as how the information is presented organizationally and design-wise, but we do tend to defer on a lot of different points. Like, we present players in certain positions. We'll have roles as far as like secondary handler. Defense would be a versatile guy, like on the wing, like a 3-and-D kind of player. And then kind of built in my archetypes as far as that goes. If you're familiar with that, I've talked about that on past podcasts with Chris here. So yeah, I mean, just come check out the Stepien. We had a group chat earlier, so that was kind of an interesting experience. So we're going to post that maybe tomorrow. So we all went back and forth about prospects because, of course, tomorrow night is the Champions Classic on ESPN. So you have a lot of top-level matchups.
So is it public knowledge that you're doing Ode to Odin with Sean yet?
I think reasonably public knowledge. I mean, Mark and Javier definitely know. I think some other people know. I haven't announced it on Twitter yet, but yeah, there's no issues there.
So should I cut this from the podcast or not?
No, you can keep it.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah. So he's going to be on Ode to Odin, and I think you said that you were recording on Wednesday, back from the dead, like Draft Lazarus.
It's crazy, man. We haven't done one since like the draft recap episode. It feels like forever. We just kind of been trying to circulate and like just come to a conclusion on the specific design, how we're incorporating this, how we're going to go about the podcast. So we finally come to a conclusion on that. And so, yeah, we'll hopefully be on more frequently like we were in the second half of the college season last year.
What's your handle?
Just pretty simply at Cole's Wicker.
All right, that's wonderful. So, Cole, what do you think about Mohamed Bamba? Because I'm interested to see what his first season with UT is going to be.
He's basically Gobert as far as length. He has all those measurables, but he's super mobile. You'll see him close out to shooters. He's incredibly mobile that way, fast. He can also shoot probably a corner three right now, which is pretty insane. Not super fluidly yet, but definitely in the realm of outcomes for him. He's going to impress you probably a little bit more offensively than you'd expect. He's not terribly skilled. He's got some things going for him.
I hear that his touch is Joel Embiid-esque, but not refined. Like, he doesn't work on his game as much as Joel Embiid does, but that he's got that feathery type of touch,
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's quite that, but I get what people are saying with that. Like, he definitely has better touch. From the foul line, he's decent. He can shoot mid-range shots. He's not quite Ayton as far as shooting touch-wise, but it's...
Dude, is anyone DeAndre Ayton?
He's unreal, dude. The movement skills, he does not look like a real human being.
Yeah, I think that if I got the first pick, I would maybe have to pick DeAndre Ayton.
It's honestly, he's the top big for me right now, and that's kind of a minority opinion. I got a lot of guys who had him outside of like the top 6 in the draft, and I have him 3. There's so much.
I think last time we talked about the draft, what I communicated was I got to go for upside because so many things have to go right to win a championship anyways, that might as well. Like, if in all likelihood, Bagley will have a better career than Ayton, probably, I would assume. But if one of them is going to be incredible, like game-changing, it's probably going to be Ayton, I think.
Yeah, you have to have like a realistic avenue to get to that upside. I'm with you. I like taking shots on upside plays, high ceiling guys, if it's projectable. It's not like just conceptual upside. With Ayton, he has enough skill. Like, he's ridiculous as far as movement goes. It just comes down to his defense. Like, if the awareness is there, he has the physical tools, 7'6" wingspan, super athletic. He just doesn't really have that anticipation inside to block shots yet. But a lot of that's just engagement. So if he plays hard, he runs the floor, and he defends, I would have a really hard time keeping him out, especially that top big spot.
I saw on the Stepien that you guys have Luka Doncic number 1.
Yes.
What's your thinking?
I don't think I've ever seen a player like him. I think his athleticism is actually a little underrated, especially with the ball. He just does everything well. There's not a 6'8", 6'9" guy in the league where you have to chase over the top of pick and roll. He's one of the best pick and roll players I've seen. Can pull up off the dribble. Not super athletic as far as burst getting to the basket, but he can shoot off the dribble. He's a wizard passer. He's basically Lonzo Ball with more functional athleticism and more skill on ball. That's kind of what you look at with him. He's got a better frame too, so he can play the 4, good rebounder. Can do a lot of things well. I think that his upside as far as being kind of one of those outlier skill guys is a little underrated.
Yeah, I really like how broad his skill set is. I feel like offensively, there's not really anything he doesn't do super well. And even when you get to the defensive side, he consistently tries hard enough that he's not a liability. Yep.
Exactly.
My big concern, I think, with Luka Doncic is, you're right, that pull-up jumper looks really good, but it's not my impression that he's stellar pulling up for long-distance jump shots in the way that, I mean, I think that's what people wanted from Lonzo, like to be pulling up for like 30-footers and stuff. I can't imagine Luka Doncic ever doing that.
Doncic's form is definitely more conducive for that. I know that Lonzo got those accolades, but mostly he was setting himself, and a lot of those long jumpers were off the catch. He could just shoot with great distances. Luka, I think, can. Like, maybe it's not projectable right now that he would come into the league and be able to do that right away, but he can shoot from really great distance because he's so strong. So,
do you get my thinking with that? If he were a traditional wing, that's not really something I would be considering as much, but I basically, if I draft him, I want him to be point guard, right? Like, if I'm the fucking Chicago Bulls and I get the number 1 pick, you jettison fucking Chris Dunn into the sun. You just put him in a space capsule and, like, just send him out there into the atmosphere, right? And you're going to run everything through Luka Doncic, and, like, pulling up from 30 might not be that important if you're going to be like Danny Green, shooting from the corners, or if you're going to be like a different type of wing, like a Tyreek Evans, like sort of slashing to the basket. Mm-hmm. But I think pulling up from deep is important if you're going to be the point guard, and you're also at the same time not going to be as physically dominant as LeBron,
I agree. I get where you're coming from. I think he does have that kind of upside from length, maybe not from 30, but from 25, 26. I think he can be decent there. And ideally, you want to play him in a system where it's more of a motion scheme so he can move off the ball too. He's got to be placed with another guy who can create. I mean, but like most guys, nobody's LeBron who can just handle all the usage.
Really? Because I think if anyone who I've seen in a while going into the draft is a wing who could just have the ball always, it would be Luka.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, like, even I agree with you for that, but I don't think even he can do everything because he's not going to get to the rim like LeBron. He's not just going to create mismatches. Like, you can switch a wing, like a more athletic wing, onto Luka. I'm not sure if he can create an ISO. That's kind of his weakness for me, is can he create against these more athletic wings that are strong, that can kind of hold position against him? That's the issue. I don't think he can win those one-on-one matchups. You can put him in pick and roll and he can win there, but can he win an ISO like LeBron can? I don't know.
Probably his optimized way of playing has to be like James Harden.
I agree.
I think you're right. Like ISO, like beating his man, he's not going to be that athletic, but the separation that you would get from a really solid pick, like someone who actually gives a shit about setting picks, having someone like Clint Capella or something who actually wants to set a pick, that's going to give him this little bit of separation where I think the defense will be a little bit off balance, and he can, either speed up or slow down or like sort of do all that like James Harden-y type stuff.
I'm with you.
So, like, now defense is off balance, and he's got this crazy ability. He's got, like, Kyrie-esque English, and, like, he uses, or maybe it's, like, closer to Tony Parker because of the whole Euro thing. I don't know. But he's just, like, really good at finding weird ways to get the ball in the basket, and I just think, I don't know. Yeah, he can't create an ISO, but, like, that's okay, I think.
No, I agree. That's why I have him number 1. I don't think it's a huge concern, but I just think that if you compare him to LeBron, that's an element of LeBron that he wins that consistently. He's that mismatch creator. I'm not sure if Luka has quite that amount of on-ball ability, but we'll see. I mean, he's only 18. He can still improve. I have number 1, again, because I think he can be that lead guard, and he can also play off-ball. He's a super top-level off-ball guy. He can spot up, run off screens. Great cutter.
Yeah. He's so smart,
Yeah,
His
exactly.
knack for cutting to the basket is, like, sort of D Wade except good level sort of in Miami. He's not like that explosive, or like Gary Harris. Again, not as explosive. I'm trying to think of someone who's really good at
it's tough
playing off ball, getting to the rim and like getting open and stuff and ghosting, who's not as athletic as he is. Maybe like Tony Allen with a jump shot though. No, but even Tony Allen was crazy athletic.
Yeah,
so,
honestly, I think it's just like he's kind of what people, like some people that didn't watch a lot of Lonzo thought Lonzo was going to be. Like, there's just so many skill gaps in Lonzo's game, but he's an excellent cutter off ball. He really moves well in that capacity. I think Luka can do that stuff. So it's just like a supersized version of him. Yeah. Well, I mean, so you're out on Lonzo or what? Not at all. No, I just have always realized the weaknesses. We talked about this, and like you've been on this from the beginning as far as some of the ceiling upsides in this class not being what people think they are.
Yeah, I think my thing with Lonzo is just that, like his big thing, like the big Lonzo thing, like what makes you bite on him is his ability to sort of reinvent the wheel from the point guard position. And like, this is such a cliche at this point. It's so annoying to hear market inefficiencies now because it's wrong most of the time. But I think one of the cases that it's right is like Lonzo sort of reinventing the wheel by like taking advantage of market inefficiencies, like sort of lax transition defense and like getting right to the baseline and inbounding right away and like getting it all started like that. And that reminds me a lot of, or what made Steve Nash special. But Steve Nash wasn't really good. Like he was good, but he wasn't like MVP caliber until he was like 25. And I think that's going to happen with Lonzo. And I wonder how Lakers fans are going to respond to that, because I think it's going to take Lonzo a while.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll get to Steve Nash level just because he's not nearly the caliber of shooter that Steve is. Off the dribble, it just doesn't translate that well.
Oh, yeah,
Nash,
yeah.
If you played Nash to score and he had to score, he could drop 40 on you. The Lakers did that in the playoffs, and like he could make difficult shots. I don't know if Lonzo's ever going to get there. We'll see, but he just doesn't profile as that kind of guy.
Well, here's more what I mean. You remember like the 7 seconds or less Suns, the first reaction from the league was just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, you know, like why is he doing this stuff? Like, why is he like going under the basket and looping back around and like throwing lobs from there? Amari Stoudemire's a power forward. What is he doing at center? And Sean, why are you playing power forward? You're supposed to be a small forward. Stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
If Lonzo hits his ceiling, he's going to be doing stuff that's really different, but it's going to take a while to do something that nobody's done before. It's not like Kobe where he modeled his game after Michael Jordan. Like I'm not even comparing the skill sets really with Lonzo and Steve Nash. I'm just sort of saying Steve Nash took a while because he was doing something that hadn't really been done before. I think Lonzo is going to end up on the same trajectory and just be slow to like get his engine running, you know?
That's definitely fair. And he's already changing like defensive scheme a little bit. Like you can't crash the boards to the same extent you do against other teams because he'll make you pay for every mistake. And he's already kind of like that. He has that intellect. We saw that in Summer League mostly because Summer League transition defense is horrendous. And he just picked that apart. It's harder to do what he does in the league when you try to take it away because you can take it away for the most part. Smart teams can take Lonzo away.
Well, they can now.
At least.
Yeah.
I just don't know how he evolves. I'm just trying to think about his avenue in the future, how he evolves so where they can't. So, like, it just has to become better on the ball. Like that's the bottom line, right?
Hopefully the answer to that is no, because I don't think he's ever going to be great on the ball. So, like, hopefully he doesn't need to develop that because I don't think he will. I sort of see him like full court sort of being the big playmaker, like the guy who makes these Kevin Love passes, except, you know, with like a little bit of a dribble game and pushes the break. That's what I see him in the full court as. And I think if Lonzo's going to make hay in the half court, it's going to have to be like in a Ryan Anderson role. A Ryan Anderson, except the ability to make Jokic touch passes, except not as swag, I guess, you know?
So what you're getting at is off ball in the half court.
Right.
For the most part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly how I pegged him. I mean, I thought he was a transition point guard who would play mostly in like a motion type scheme, move off the ball, leverage that cutting ability. Of course, if he shoots like this, you can't really do much with it, right? I mean, if he's going to shoot.
No shit, man.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that was the one indicator that I thought he would do, not off the dribble, but off the catch. I thought in college, he established himself. He was comfortable from NBA range off the catch. He was confident. And all that's just kind of gone out the fucking window now. It's at least so far. It's a small sample, but even Summer League, he didn't shoot well. Preseason, he didn't shoot well. Regular season, he hasn't shot well. So when is he going to start shooting the ball?
I don't know, man. Can you imagine being Lonzo Ball and having the pressure that's put on him?
No, I cannot.
I don't love the psychological argument. I inherently sort of recoil at arguments like the one I'm making right now, but this is sort of one of those outlier cases where his life is insane. like LeVar, his dad, is fucking crazy. The expectations that have been put on him are insane. I just feel like he's mentally just like, oh God, what do I do? And I think at this point, if you run with Occam's razor, the more likely thing is that in college, he just didn't have all this bullshit, right, to deal with.
Yeah.
And now in the NBA, he does. And that's what changed. Because, I mean, even though the NCAA season is short, he still has more of a sample size being like a really good shooter than a really, really, really bad one.
Correct. Yeah, I think they were both the extremes. I mean, in college, he still wasn't a great free throw shooter. He was a good 3-point shooter. He just monopolized all the efficient possessions. Like he most of the time he spotted up, he cut. There was all these transition opportunities. He's not like, what is he now? Like 39% of his possessions are finished in pick and roll. He never did that at UCLA. Like, this is not his game. He's being asked to do something, probably because the Lakers want to see what he can do before this free agency period and how to build around him. But yeah, I think what you're saying has a lot of merit. He's never had to deal with this kind of just general publicity. He's a really good kid too. That's what kind of sucks, is like, he's not like his dad. His dad's like really extravagant, of course, and he doesn't seem to be like that.
Yeah, and I think probably if you don't want to make the psychological argument, which again I sort of try not to, like, now that Sabonis isn't feeling the weight of the world on his shoulder, he's gonna like really break out, and he's having a good season. He had a good start to his season last year, so we'll see. But like, arguments to me like that, I don't like that argument. I don't like arguments like that generally. So if you want to put stuff like that aside and think about it in a way that makes sense basketball wise, alongside TJ Leaf and a lot of the spacing that they had at UCLA, and the fact that it was actually a team that was well built for him and talented compared to the competition, all of that stuff is out the window with the Lakers, because it's insane watching defenses just collapse, just crunch into the paint and get 50 people contesting on every single jump shot. I think that's why Lonzo can't finish and why Ingram can't finish, and the Lakers are trying to run so much offense through them, either in pick and rolls or through ISOs. They know that they can't pull up and make a jump shot, which is fine. Most guys who are 12 like they are can't do that. So they know that he's going to try to get to the basket, and there's just not spacing to do it, you know? Like, there just isn't. And Lonzo, I think, especially if you look at his shot release and how much better he is in the full court, just having a little bit of breathing room around the basket, I think is going to make such a huge difference with him if they put better talent around him.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case, or at least some of the case. I still have my reservations about his finishing ability. He's not a very flexible athlete, has problems slowing down. He's just not a natural finisher. Most of his finishes at UCLA, again, were on cuts. Like, he can really load up and finish above the rim when he has space. It's more like on ball, he gets sped up a little bit. He doesn't have that really good body control around the rim, but he's shown better touch than I thought. So it's more of a projection. He definitely doesn't have the spacing. There's no argument there.
It's kind of sad watching it. I think you're right. With the ball in his hands, he doesn't have really great handles for going through traffic, and he's got so much traffic, you know?
Yeah.
He just looks like a kid sometimes, cramming himself into the paint, and he just ends up getting the ball stripped easily, and he just looks so dejected, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Ingram looked that way last year at times too. I think he's looked better of late, actually. He's played pretty decent ball. He's starting to get a little more confidence, slashing into the hoop. So it just takes time. I mean, these young guys, you're not going to be good your rookie year, especially with Lonzo, the kind of transformation he's had to take on ball as a usage guy, creating for others, creating for himself as well. I mean, people look at the Phoenix Suns game, the third game of the season, it's like, oh, look, he can do all those things. That was the worst fucking defense I've ever seen in an NBA game in my life. It was horrendous. I'm not trying to take it away from Lonzo. Like, he was good, but it was like these guys are ducking under screens like 8 feet. Nobody was making rotations. I mean, there's a reason that Earl Watson was fired. As much as it sucks, like somebody gets fired, there's a reason for it.
You have to take that away from Lonzo in the same way that you have to, going into this Denver-Portland game, which we should talk about. I'm recording all of this, so it's probably going to be in the podcast.
Word.
Going into this Portland Nuggets game, when I was sort of breaking down the comparison, you had to just take away their blowout against the Suns when CJ was sitting, because it screws up their offensive defensive rating so much. It's just, we don't have enough of a sample size for like noise like that to get sort of taken out in the wash, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that part. I mean,
I feel like
I should rephrase and say I don't want to take it away from Lonzo completely, but yeah, it does mitigate the impact when you're not doing it against an actual NBA roster, right? Like, you have to keep it in context, but you can't just strip everything away from me. Like, that was worth nothing. Like, he did show some moves in there, like a couple, like, I think turnaround fadeaway. He had a nice finish with his left. So there was some stuff he did well, but I generally agree with you. I think that you have to at least put that in context.
I guess you didn't get to watch the Nuggets and Blazers tonight. You said you watched a little bit of the Knicks and the Cavs.
Cavs, yeah.
Did you watch the first half or the last half?
I watched a little bit of the second half. The first half I was doing another podcast, and the second half I was kind of doing a group chat while watching. So I caught like the highlights and like the major things, like Ntilikina. Actually, a little bit at the end of the first half with Ntilikina.
Yeah. How do you feel about Ntilikina right now?
He's good. I mean, he's kind of what I expected. I had him 8th overall in my rankings. I think he's defended a little bit better than I thought he would, just transitioning. He's kind of a quiet kid. I didn't think he would have this kind of energy and confidence so early. He's playing pretty technically sound defense. I know.
Well, LeBron went at his jugular, you know.
I've heard, yeah. That's I like the way he responded to that. I mean, he didn't back down, and that's kind of what you want to see. He's a good player. I think that he has issues as a primary ball handler as far as handling, getting into the paint. That's not really in his game yet. It's just more of a rawness thing. He might get that eventually. He's a pretty good passer in pick and roll. I think he can function in that system. So I've been impressed.
Here's the thing. The Knicks need to shut down Kristaps right now and make for damn sure that they get Luka Doncic. Because Luka, Kristaps, Ntilikina, I like it. You know, like, that all makes sense together. And like, if they, for fuck's sake, if they get the 8th seed in the playoffs and just get obliterated by, I don't know, whoever's the 1st seed, that's going to be like a disaster scenario. Because I don't think, do they have their pick the year after? I feel like they don't.
I don't know. I think who would they have traded for? I don't think they traded that yet. At least I hope not, for Knicks fans' sakes.
Yeah, but God, they just really need a good pick this year.
That'd be an awesome fit with Doncic next to Ntilikina. I think that's the kind of the perfect duality there, because you get Ntilikina, he can create on ball, but probably not at super high usage, not as your primary. But Doncic could be that guy. Ntilikina could guard point of attack. Doncic could probably guard either fours or the weakest perimeter player. That'd be awesome.
Well, and if they're your big three or whatever, it still warrants running most stuff through Kristaps because how good those two are off ball, you know?
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes when you've got a guy like LeBron, if you put a guy like fucking Derrick Rose next to him, like, he's just sapping up possessions in a way that isn't constructive. Sometimes you just got to admit to yourself that on offense, like, maybe the best case scenario is getting LeBron to the basket, seeing what happens after that. Like, if it's a kick out to a corner three, that's awesome. If LeBron gets fouled, also awesome. If he finishes over a defender, that's great. So it's like, you know, if LeBron had unlimited energy, you should just run that every single time, right? I think that everything with the Knicks here going forward should probably start and end with Kristaps, except for when he's tired, and that's why you would have Luka, but not have Luka be worthless off ball like Derrick Rose is.
It's a great point. Yeah, the Knicks do own all their future picks, so they don't have any concerns as far as that goes. I really like that fit a lot. I think that would really work, especially if you worked in more of a motion tight scheme and you got those guys moving off ball and you really leveraged all of their shooting. Like, you have to leverage Doncic shooting. You can leverage Kristaps. I mean, he's been fantastic. Pick and pops. He can run off screens. And this year he's added that post element. They'd have a really awesome young nucleus if that happened.
Yeah, I think it would all fit together really well. And they're also all European, and I think that works. So if they can get this elite talent young and on 4-year rookie contracts, then you can sort of like hold the fort in a way that is actually promising for the future, and just like sort of just, I don't know, just like let those awful contracts expire. Like, just like if you could have cost controlled Kristaps for a couple more years, cost controlled Ntilikina for like 3 more years, and cost controlled Luka for like 4 more years, then you aren't just totally kneecapped by the fact that you have so much money put into bad players.
Yeah, because they really can't leverage anything in free agency, signing guys for maybe they can get some reasonable contracts to flip in a trade, but for the most part, they're pretty hamstrung by, you know, that 2016 offseason. It's pretty dreadful. I mean, you look at how much of their cap is kind of sunk cost. It's not great, but moving forward, I mean, they don't really have to have that. Like you said, if they get a valuable draft position, we'll see how well that goes. It sucks because Kristaps is playing so damn well.
Yeah. The interesting thing, though, and I feel like there's no way they're going to do this unless they... So, Kristaps has like an elbow injury or something?
Does he? I didn't see.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, and tonight he wasn't great against the Cavs. He was, I think, 6 for 20. And a lot of the offense was running through Cantor and ending up in Hardaway's hands. Hardaway, I think, led the game in scoring, but it's not like he was the initiator of anything. He's fucking bad. I don't know. So Hardaway was hitting his shots for once, and that was great. But most stuff was going through Cantor, which was weirdly effective in a way that I sort of liked, but whatever. But
it's the Cavs.
Is it just the Cavs?
For Cantor being effective, like running your offense through Cantor. I don't know if I'm going to run my offense through Cantor. I mean, he can be valuable in certain spots, but if you're going to run your starting lineup through him, I'm not going to do that.
Well, consider this. Okay, I'm sure that you've heard the whole statistic about Kristaps taking contested shots. How it's insane, right?
Yes.
How he's shooting like ungodly percentages, even with defenders within 3 feet.
I have, yeah.
Okay, so if you've got Enes Kanter, your center has to cover Enes Kanter, right?
Yes.
Or else he's just going to tear your 4 to shreds.
Yeah, I get the advantages he creates for Kristaps as far as matchups, but for him specifically to have the ball and kind of be the decision maker, that's where I kind of deviate.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a good point. I think that Cantor, he's done some good things for Kristaps. I mean, Kristaps is shooting over the top of Thaddeus Young guys. He can do that, and that's been a really big addition for him this year.
Yeah, and none of his numbers are sustainable, but they're not Orlando Magic unsustainable.
Yeah, he's that gifted. I mean, sometimes it just takes time to establish yourself in the post, be comfortable shooting over guys. He's not as bothered by guys pushing into him now. I feel like he's adjusted to that. Where at first, when he got into the league, he'd be pushed off his spots when he tried to post up, and now he has a better feel for that.
Long term, though, do you still think if you could grab any 4 from across the league who's not LeBron or Draymond, just like an archetype of a 4 or a 5, if you think that Kristaps should be the 4, what do you do? What do you? So really I think you probably want to. He hasn't been so bad chasing guys on the perimeter, Kristaps, I mean, but he's still not optimized in that spot, right?
Agreed.
So I think he should be center. If who you guard is your position, then he should be a center. So who do you put it for if you could put anyone?
I mean, ideally you'd want somebody who can guard the perimeter, can also rebound, because that's a big area of deficiency with Kristaps is he's not great boxing out. So you need somebody that can do that, as well as ideally space the floor to give Kristaps that pick and pop ability, and then have a point guard who can get into the lane. Those players are hard to find. Nobody really pops to mind that does all of those things outside of course, Draymond.
Hey, well, so I was gonna say, what about Julius Randle?
That was actually one of the first guys, but he can't really space the floor. But I guess that's workable. I wouldn't hate that if they actually took a gamble on Julius as a free agent this summer. If they invested an adequate amount of money in him, that might be a workable fit. Even though he's been best this year as a backup 5 and feasting on second units. Yeah,
but I think he's been best in that role though, because they're spacing in that second unit and because they switch things.
Very fair. Yeah, I'm just saying he gets good matchups there, and you can take advantage of it offensively. In the face-up game, he usually has some kind of strength or positional advantage, agility or whatnot. But that's really interesting. I like that fit a little bit.
Well, yeah, and with Julius Randle, I think you have a lot of the aspects that you're getting right now from Cantor that make it so that it's okay, well, if you've got this bruiser down low, you're going to have to pick and choose whether you want to be putting 4s on Julius, small ball 4s on Julius, which is sometimes not super awesome. And whether you want to put centers out on Kristaps, it could force that same thing that you're getting from Cantor. And at the same time, though, you're getting the ability to go out on the perimeter and switch onto guys so that on defense, Kristaps can actually play rim protector.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of logical sense. I think one guy in the draft, the best fit for Bagley in the draft, I think might be the Knicks, just because he can guard on the perimeter conceptually. He can do a little bit of weak side rim protection. If he can space the floor, all that'd be ideal. He doesn't quite have that power game yet, but he does. He has good touch on the post. I think he can beat mismatches, and he can probably beat some modern NBA fours there, especially in time. That would be a really intriguing fit.
Do the Knicks have any expiring contracts?
Let me check.
I feel like no.
Probably that's probably the safe bet. Let me see.
Oh, God, I don't think they do.
The top of my head, I'm going to say no. They have a couple player option guys, so that's probably not going to be. So like Ron Baker has a player option, Kyle O'Quinn, they're probably both going to take those. Ron Baker definitely should take his. All of Enes Kanter has a player option. He's going to take his at $18.6 million, I would think. So yeah, everybody else is pretty much locked in except for some minimum guys like Ramon Sessions. Of course, that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, so maybe if you're the Knicks, you stretch Joakim Noah. Does that open up enough money to offer like a 13, 14, 15 offer to Julius Randle if he doesn't end up getting traded?
I don't think that's quite enough, unless Kanter, of course, would opt out. I think they wouldn't have the ability to do that. I think what they would try to do is if Randall would take like the actual mid-level. I'm not sure if he's going to get much more than that, honestly. I don't think Randall's going to get like 10, 12 million a year. It's a suppressed market. Not a lot of teams have cap space. He could be one of the guys that gets like the full MLE, and that'd be a good get for New York if they could do that.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I mean, it depends, but it's restricted free agency, so it always depends. I mean, like, the Knicks are lucky that the Sacramento Kings are so poorly run, because the other thing that makes sense I feel like Skal Labissière as the future center of the Kings, Julius Randle would make sense next to him too.
Okay. I get the thought process behind that. I do definitely get that.
For a lot of the same reasons that Julius Randle and Kristaps is a good 4-5. But they already gave a whole ton of money to fucking Zach Randolph. So, like, yeah.
How do you feel about Skal?
I think I believe. I believe. I do. My big problem with Skal is that the numbers don't validate the eye test with him, and that he's got like real gaps in his game. You know, you talk a lot about like 1 and 2 motion jump shots.
Yeah.
And I think Skal has just like a really, really pretty jump shot. He shoots fadeaways, more 2 motion or whatever, but he like strikes me as the type of guy who could like sort of do trailing threes really well and get it off somewhat quickly. And so I think offensively he's just going to be great. And defensively, I think he plays good help defense, but the reason why you would put Julius Randle next to him is like if there is a bruiser, then Julius Randle can deal with DeMarcus Cousins. Like you wouldn't put Skal on DeMarcus.
Yeah, it's a workable fit. I think that I'm not sure if I'm considering Skal in the calculus, but if you were to build around him, I think it would have to be somebody like that because Skal is such a tweener. Like he really is a 4-5 tweener, like the definition of it, because he's not going to anchor on the glass inside. He's not quite good enough to defend the perimeter. I agree with you that his weak side rim protection is probably his best defensive quality. He's pretty good there. And his jump shot, if he can ever shoot NBA threes, he has a little bit too much input in his shot that I'd like as far as elevation. That's his best trait is mid-range. Like they run a lot of last-second shots through him. Sacramento does just because he's the only guy that can get a shot in a lot of situations. He can just elevate over the top. Does that translate to NBA 3? Maybe. But yeah, he's intriguing. I think he's a rotation big in the league. I'm not sure if he's a starter. Like he's not my kind of guy that I want down there.
Yeah, I think what you hit on there was that with Skal, you would sort of need to build around him because we're talking about Julius Randle, like going and getting him to sort of mop up some of the inefficiencies in Skal's game or some of the weaknesses that are baked into his game and his physical build. But is he good enough to build around? That you guys, I remember after the draft, you and Sean and Mark and Javier recorded, like sort of went through all the picks and talked about why the Suns went for Josh Jackson because of fit, but then sort of criticized the Suns for even thinking that they should be picking for fit at all because their players aren't good enough to warrant doing that. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, it just depends on what your methodology is. For me, it's a pretty high bar. If you're drafting for fit, you got to really, those cornerstone guys, that's a high threshold for me to meet, in my personal opinion.
Scal probably doesn't hit that. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah. He could, though. He could in a way that I feel like no one else on the Kings could.
So I know
like
you're not
Jaren
as high
Fox.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Jaren Fox, a.k.a. Ish Smith, is okay, you know?
You went there, man. Oh, God. Kings fans are going to be irate. This is great.
He is Ish Smith, though. I mean, let's be real, right?
He's a more explosive version. I mean, he's got hops, dude. Like, he can really elevate around the rim. But the question is, on that team, you really have to build around him. I think he needs someone like Kristaps, where in pick and roll, the big tend to fade towards Kristaps for the shooting gravity, and that'll open up the lane for Fox. That's the problem with the Kings, is there's just no space for him to drive, and nobody respects his shot.
Yeah, and maybe if you had Scala BCA at center, I mean, yeah, if Jaren Fox actualizes, which you won't, and Scal actualizes, which you probably won't, then it's a really good 1-5 pair, but they won't.
Yeah, that's kind of where I come down on it. It's like there's a chance, and more optimistic Kings fans, I mean, be optimistic. That's fine. I'm just like the likelihood of Scal ever being able to anchor the 5 and being like a pick and pop 3-point option in like a Porzingis type mold to really open up the lane for Fox. The chance that Fox ever becomes Mike Conley is just not very high. Like statistically,
yeah, that's what people. Oh God, people always brought up guys like Conley and guys like Kawhi with him. It's like, yeah, well, you know, sometimes guys develop jump shots where like they don't exist. It's like, man, you're talking about, you can name like, okay, actually, let's go ahead and do this exercise. So like Kawhi did that, and Conley did that, and Jason Kidd did that. That's all I can think of so far.
There's just not many guys. It's tough, especially when you look at indicators like 3-point attempt rate. Even Conley was like 2.5 times Fox thus far in his career. He just doesn't even shoot threes. That's another indicator.
Yeah. Conley put up shots. Like that was almost part of the lashback early in his career, is that like he kept shooting.
Yeah, but that's good. I mean, you want guys to develop comfort. That's why I like Dennis Smith so much, is because like he's at least taking threes. He did in college. He took a ton of NBA threes, 39 NBA threes in college, which is really good to see from your point guard. If you see that kind of confidence and that strength level, we've talked about Fox's mechanics in the past. They just don't really translate that well to the 3-point line. He's been a better mid-range shooter this year, but you have to be like an outlier in that area to be a proficient mid-range scorer. Like CJ McCollum's like 55% from like 16 feet to the 3-point line. Fox is like 37 to 38%, which is pretty damn good for a rookie. But I think he was like, the last I checked, was 7th in the league or something in total frequency of shooting from there. So it's tough. Like you can't survive on that shot.
Yeah, and CJ McCollum, of course, can hit threes and play off ball.
Oh, yeah.
Which,
for sure.
If you take that stuff away from CJ McCollum, you basically have Evan Turner, right?
It's very true.
Yeah. So, but what do you think about the future Knicks starting lineup of Ntilikina, Tim Hardaway, and Luka Doncic at 3, and Julius Randle at 4, and Porzingis at 5?
I mean, it's really
and
captivating.
Ron Baker as 6th man of the year.
Oh God! Until that, it was pretty captivating. Obviously, the skill sets they overlap pretty well. I mean, you have an initiator in Doncic. You have a secondary initiator in Ntilikina. You have one of the best stretch bigs, two-way bigs in the league in Porzingis. Just Randall can compensate for Porzingis's inabilities in the post as far as guarding guys with girth who can score. And then Hardaway Jr., just if he shoots well, he's a player. If he doesn't shoot well, then he's a huge minus.
Right.
I mean, ideally, you'd want somebody who can defend at that spot. But, I mean, the roster construct definitely makes some sense.
Well, yeah, I guess if Tim Hardaway doesn't work out, then Courtney Lee isn't like the worst stand-in until you find a suitable Hardaway replacement.
No, not really. I mean, like in most matchups, he's
like,
not
just like a low
negative
usage, shooting guard size defender type guy.
Yeah, if he can knock down threes, he can maintain some value. It's just if he goes against bigger shooting guards, like we saw him against Jaylen Brown earlier this year, who just abused him when the Celtics upsized playing them. That's a tough matchup, but I mean that's going to happen in the league. You're going to come across matchups that aren't favorable to you.
Yeah, and like at least you have Ntilikina to guard the more threatening guard. If you had that lineup, right, and you were playing the Wizards, who defends John Wall and who defends Bradley Beal?
Oh boy. That's really tough, man. I think I would probably have to put Frank on Wall just because how much pick and roll they run. You just can't. I don't know if Courtney Lee's going to be able to stick in those situations. It depends on what your coverage is, first of all. If you just trap Wall, then I would put Lee on him and then make Ntilikina chase Bradley Beal. He could stay attached on those down screen actions that they use for him, all those floppy sets. So it depends on, I guess, approach. What is the scheme, and then adjusting from that.
Yeah, what are they trying to take advantage of, and who's hot?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, if Wall's killing you, I think you just trap Wall. I mean, Gortat's a good enough passer to where you're rolling the dice because you can't give up corner threes to Otto Porter or Beal. But if it's Markieff Morris, he can do some things. But I would roll the dice on just making sure you cut off the head of the snake with Wall and then dealing with it from there, having a guy stay attached to Beal and at least mitigate your losses in that backcourt.
Okay, so we have talked a little bit about Dennis Smith. I'm from Dallas, so I'm not a fan because I'm a professional NBA media member who covers the NBA and has no inclinations one way or the other, but I am a supporter of the Dallas Mavericks in theory. So whether or not Dennis Smith is good is really important to me. And I said that I'm a little worried about Dennis Smith, but I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that and see if even with that elaboration, if you just disagreed, because I think there's a strong chance you might. So my thing with Dennis Smith is I totally understand where you're coming from, that he's putting up shots, and that's a good sign. By the way, Devin Booker for MVP. So that sort of capability to be high volume sort of demonstrates that you think that shot's going to go in if you're taking it, and you can get that shot. So that generally, once you're not 19, works out. I think that's the logic anyways for why putting up shots, even if it's not efficient, is good. My concern is that the threshold at which a point guard like Dennis Smith becomes the best. So, okay, Dennis Smith has to be on ball, right? I think, sort of.
I think he can spot up, but yeah, he doesn't move well without the ball. Let's start there. He does not go off screens. He's not a very intuitive cutter. He can shoot. I'm pretty high in his shooting long term. I think he'll work out the kinks and be a plus shooter, but he's not going to be a high level cutter.
So you have to be either Russell Westbrook or prime Derrick Rose, that caliber, if you want to be a sort of primary option on a deep playoff team. And of this archetype, for every one of those, there's a Steve Francis or a Eric Bledsoe or a Emmanuel Mudiay. No, that's not quite one for one. I mean, even Damian Lillard. I have concerns if Damian Lillard's your best player.
Yeah, no, I do too. I don't think Dennis Smith can be your best player, but I think that goes back to the point we talked about previously in the draft when we did a pre-draft podcast last year is, do you really see any of those guys being the number one on a title team? That was the point of what a lot of us were saying, is the upside in that class was a little overrated. I don't see Dennis Smith as the number one. I think he can be the number two if things
go.
So
you think he can?
Yeah, I think he can be the number two guy on a title team if things go right for him. Not by any means a lock, but I think he has at least the baseline to get there.
That's my concern, is that it's a little bit like Russell Westbrook, except that he's not as good, basically, where there would be inherent friction between him and the number one player on a championship team, right? Because if we're saying he probably won't ever be good enough to be the number one guy on a championship team, then he has to be number two. And I think that there's friction with his skill set if you were to have a number one who would presumably be ball dominant.
I think that logic is sound, but I'm much higher on Dennis Smith's shooting than Russell Westbrook. I mean, if you compare the two at the same age and how they shoot, it's completely not on the same planet. Dennis Smith's mechanics are really sound for a player of his archetype. For how athletic he is, a lot of guys, you got on the line. Rose didn't shoot like that. Wall doesn't shoot like that still. Westbrook, even Bledsoe. I mean, he really developed over time. Bledsoe's actually an underrated off the dribble shooter, but Smith has already shown that ability at 19. I'm not saying he's been efficient, because no primary creators that aren't named Ben Simmons are efficient as far as scoring and all of that. When you have to be the highest usage guy in your team, that's just not going to be a reasonable option to ask or reasonable accomplishment. But Smith has mechanics to do that. I think he can play off ball. I get the friction element because he's not optimized off ball. But again, if you can shoot and you can space the floor, Carlisle, I think, will manufacture ways to get him moving and active. So he's a presence off the ball. He's a threat. But yeah, I'm not of the camp that he's Russell Westbrook, where if he's off ball, he can't really space. Nobody cares about his shot. I think he's going to get there, but his ceiling outcome is how you feel about his shot mostly.
Well, and how you feel about his willingness to play off ball.
Yes.
Or if he thinks of himself as a guy who can sometimes play off ball. Because Chris Paul, that took until he was 33 to even suggest the idea that he would be the second best player on a championship team. For that to even be a thing that he would consider, he had to like deal with the fucking Clippers for like 6 years or something. I just feel like, it's a lot like Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, how they sort of like nullify each other's strengths a little bit.
It's tough. I think it's a great point you made, but this is the catch-22, is you want somebody who's geared like Dennis is. You want that mentality of, I'm going to attack you. I think I'm better than you. But you also want some kind of deferment when you pair him with another star, right? Like that's the whole issue with having star-laden teams, is how they coexist, not only on the court skill-wise, but also mentally. I can't attest to if Smith will ever develop that companionship with other people. I don't know him personally. I don't know his playing style. Like, at NC State.
Well, just think about his playing style, like not even his personality. He is a guy who we've already said that he's best with the ball in his hands. So many of his shots come off the dribble, and he doesn't move without the ball really well. Granted, not a lot of guys his age do. In fact, that would be a tantalizing thing if there was like a 19-year-old guard with his skill set that like moved off ball well. I just like, I don't know. I don't see it ever like coming to fruition. And like, it's funny because if he were to fit alongside a actual best player on a championship team, like as the number 2, he would need a hyper dominant big man like Shaq and Kobe, right? Where Shaq was the number 1 option for all intents and purposes, but Kobe had the ball in his hands a lot, except like Shaq doesn't work as well in the modern NBA because there's not a lot of Shaqs, and because anyone who approximates Shaq, that just doesn't work as well, right? So you would need like a modern NBA. So basically what I'm describing is Kristaps.
I mean, it's definitely that'd be an ideal fit for sure. But you can even look at like a Lowry DeRozan, that kind of relationship where Lowry's learned to play off ball more for DeRozan to do his thing. DeRozan's not nearly as adept off ball, but Lowry has kind of manufactured his game to fit around that. I think that Smith has that capability. I think, again, it depends on the shot. If he can space and he's willing to do that, which I don't see any reason to think that he's not willing to play off the ball. Even at NC State, like he would pass and let other people initiate sets. Like the Markelle Johnson, who was the freshman last year, he was the only other creator on the team, and he would defer to him at times. Like he doesn't want to run 1-5 pick and roll every single possession, I don't think. At least he didn't want to last year. I mean, it's exhausting. You want to get off ball. You want to be able to operate in those settings. Who knows? I mean, I get your skepticism for sure, and especially when you couple in defense.
Yeah. So are you worried about his defense at the point of attack? Because I'm not really sure yet. I mean, like I just think that he's so far away from, I think, where he'll end up being at this point, that even if he ends up being bad in the future as a point guard defender, it won't be bad in this type of way, right? Where like he just doesn't know what he's doing, right? Like if he's bad in the future, he would have to like sort of demonstrate that like James Harden-esque unwillingness to do it, because I think that if he ends up being as good on offense as he could be, then he's sort of going to have baked into his mindset, I'm so good at offense that I know how to defend because I know what the opposing player is sort of trying to do. So that's why like you can see Kyrie step up sometimes, right? And it's why like Chris Paul, I think despite his diminutive size, when he actually does try, and he tries most of the time, that's why I think Chris Paul works. So, like, I think Dennis Smith, if I had to expect one way or the other to go with Dennis Smith, like, he probably, I mean, like, he's not much physically different than I think Chris Paul. And so I don't think that it's, again, like, we're guessing on his personality because we don't really know, but it's just like, I would bet that he's more like Chris Paul in his personality than he is like James Harden.
Well, that's his favorite player in the league is Chris Paul. So that mentality,
it's true.
That manifested in high school. Like he was a son of a bitch. Like he'd get in your body. He'd really try. I think he has great tools. He's stronger than Chris Paul. He's bigger. Like he has the physical. That's his most underrated qualities. He's really, really strong. His build. Like if he really engages, he was pretty good at point of attack defense in college. Like he could get around screens, he can absorb that contact and stick on somebody's hip. He's strong enough to do all that stuff. That's why I kind of a minority opinion that I thought that Smith was going to end up as a better defensive player than Fox. And not a lot of people shared that because of the strength difference. I think that's the main thing, but it's all about willingness.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, if you think about what makes Tony Allen, it's just like his ability to be quick enough to stay in front of someone, and then his barrel chestedness given his size and quickness to like not only have the footwork to stay in front of him, but like the physical heft to stay in front of him, but not be pushed back by like a bigger guy. And I think that once you are looking at a defender who operates like that, like as a mostly, okay, well, if you're a point guard defender, then it's more important, I think, probably, than it is as like a wing defender to like have the whole, well, I can switch, I have a long wingspan, and I can like dig on drives. This is sort of like Kawhi Leonard is like sort of the perfect wing defender, but if you're defending point guards, you sort of have to have like a different set of skills that I think Dennis Smith does have.
That's fair. I think ideally you want somebody like Donovan Mitchell who can switch more, and he has that strength, he has the length, but he also has that competitive fire. Like he's consistently active. That's Smith's deal. He's not always active. I worry about him most off ball just because he's never had to do that stuff, and you can tell like he goes through the motions. He doesn't know where to be. He misses rotations. There's a bunch of issues with his off-ball defense. He's not that switchable because he doesn't have that great wingspan. He can hold position in the post against a lot of guys you wouldn't expect, again, because of that strength, but guys can usually just shoot over the top. There's definitely issues. I mean, again, most of this last draft were guards. They were offensive-oriented guards like Malik Monk, even Markelle Fultz, even though he had better tools. Like, he wasn't any sure bet as a defensive player. Lonzo Ball has his deficiencies. He's way better off ball than a lot of these guys, but on ball, the same issues. So that was kind of what you got. Like De'Aaron Fox even. He's not going to switch. If he's out of a play because he gets hung up on a screen, if he gets caught on a screen, he's not going to recover because he doesn't have the strength to really impede you on the back of your hip chasing down, doesn't have that length to erase your shot. It's tough. Like, point of attack defense is hard, man. Like, ideally you just switch everything, but a lot of point guards can't switch onto a 4 and then defend those in the post. Those guys just don't come around that often.
I think some of the best NBA defenses have had guys, I think at the 1, you don't need to be as switchable as you need to be at the 2 and the 3.
For sure.
I think that if you're the San Antonio Spurs, you've sort of like proven this model where basically you're going to like crash the defensive board. So if someone misses, then that's great. Your rim protection doesn't need to be hyper elite, but part of the reason you don't have to have hyper elite rim protection from your big men specifically is because if Kawhi or Danny Green sort of interrupts or gets their hands in a drive from a guard or from a wing or from whatever, if they're involved in that initial thing, the offensive player with the ball in his hands has to like respond to, oh shit, Kawhi's claws are like poking out at me. So you have to, divert your path a little bit to the right. And that gives Pau Gasol like an extra second or so to step up and contest when normally he would be too slow to do that in a way that like Rudy Gobert would be there regardless of whether there was that help defense, and like, it's not like Tony Parker was a help defender on the best defense in the league for the last couple of years. Tony Parker was like, okay, basically he was like a shitty on-ball defender, but it was okay because I think if you have a 2 and a 3, that can create a illusion of rim protection. Does that all make sense?
It does. And I think most people think about switching in an on-ball capacity, but honestly, a lot more of it is off-ball. That's what makes the Warriors so dangerous. I mean, one of the many reasons, of course, but they switch so much off-ball, like on screens. When you run floppy sets, they'll just switch that, and then it neutralizes everything. And that comes into play when you have the wings, because they can do that. You don't need that as much from your point guard because he's guarding the ball. So, yeah, I definitely get where you're going with that. It's tough to say with Dennis Smith specifically if he gets there. I don't know. He's a talent play. He's a talent play. He has a lot of physical gifts, and he's not stupid. Like he got just completely killed in the draft process because people didn't think he was a highly intelligent player. I don't really think that's true. I think, again, that's the Lonzo effect of setting the bar too high. That's not reasonable for most prospects. He is a high IQ player for what he is as a player, his archetype. I think he's got good enough feel. He reaches like a basic benchmark where I feel comfortable projecting him offensively. It's just going to take time to iron out.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch a lot of North Carolina State in a vacuum. So I didn't watch many games from start to finish because they were just such an eyesore. But the argument against, well, he's not a smart offensive player, or like not a smart player, I guess. The argument against that sort of rests on the fact that, I mean, there's plenty of video breakdowns, which I would watch, of Dennis Smith where he takes like a crazy ass falling shot, or like you said, he shot 39 threes from NBA length, which is a few steps behind the 3-point line. And he got a lot of knock for not being as efficient as Markelle Fultz. But it's like, if you look at North Carolina and the way that they were going to get a good shot off, that just didn't exist. It's like, yeah, he was taking some bad shots, but they were like the best shot given the situation, which says a lot more about the team construction than it does about him.
Yeah, I mean, the team was really bad. Same with Markelle at UW. It's just those situations just were horrible. That's why you have to contextualize all college performance, and you have to actually look deeper than the surface level stats and understand like who on NC State other than Dennis Smith could create. There's one guy, Markelle Johnson, as a freshman. He wasn't that good at it. I mean, he's going to be pretty good this year, I think, but he couldn't really do that much last year, and that's it. Like Omer Yurtseven was a prospect for a big man. He was probably the most disappointing player in college basketball last year. He was I think it was some people considered him a first-round pick before last season, and now it's like he's not even on the board because he was so poor. So context is definitely crucial when evaluating these guys, and that built into that whole narrative of Dennis Smith doesn't give a shit, which frankly, some of that was fair. I mean, he half-assed a lot on defense at NC State. He didn't defend a lot. And offensively, again, he didn't have a ton of space, so it looked like he wasn't trying. That wasn't the case for the most part. So again, draft narratives.
Yeah, they're funky. And then now Markelle Fultz can't shoot. So.
Oh God, dude, I don't want to talk. That's so. I love watching the Sixers so much. So I'm glad they sat him, just because I don't have to like endure that emotional kind of duality every time you watch him. Like you want to root for these guys, and then Markelle is just sucking the life out of you because you're seeing not the real Markelle Fultz. Yeah.
So in that game that Joel Embiid sat against the Jazz, where Ben Simmons was sort of playing, I mean, the quote-unquote center was Dario, but like Dario wasn't protecting the rim. Ben Simmons was sort of playing rim protector. And then on offense, he was sort of showing off a lot of like the power forward type skills that he's good at. And he demonstrated a lot more in college than he has thus far, sort of as like the true point guard in an offense. And I was just thinking the whole time, like, man, wouldn't it be great if there was a secondary playmaker so that sometimes Ben Simmons could be the guy with the ball in his hands and pick and roll actions, but sometimes he could be the guy rolling and like play Joel Embiid in the corner to like have enough spacing. Wouldn't that be sweet if they had like, I don't know, some type of guard who could play off ball and like be an offensive threat so that Simmons could show a little bit more of that versatility. It's a shame that they don't have anyone like that, you know?
Hey, you just kind of alluded to the article I wrote today. That's basically what I said.
Really?
As like basically Simmons, to improve, he's got to be a better finisher. I think that he's a finesse guy. He could be so much more powerful at the rim, inherit those kind of Giannis type qualities where, I mean, he's not going to be that kind of long strider length extension, but you can be more physical. But the second part of that was we haven't really tapped into Simmons's versatility yet. He was so versatile at LSU as far as being the roll man, such great body control on the situations. He can obviously
He was a big man at LSU.
Yes, he actually played. I mean, he played point guard, but he also played big man. Like there was two different sets of skills, and we've only really seen the point guard Ben Simmons. I mean, I know they didn't start the season with him as the quote unquote point guard. They morphed into that lineup, put Bayless on the second unit. But he just has so much more ability. Like he can post up, he can operate on 4-and-3 advantage situations and pick and roll. You just need someone like Markelle to really demand the gravity of the defense. And right now they're operating with TJ McConnell. Love TJ. Bayless is not the playmaking type. He's more of an off-ball shooter. So when they get Fultz back, if he comes back and that threat of the jump shot comes back, they're going to be a freaking handful, man.
Yeah, no, God, it's not awesome that Markelle Fultz is doing his thing or whatever the hell it is. Specifically, I think because of that, because I think that what we're seeing with Joel Embiid's conditioning is like, well, every time down the floor, your best option, and I think Coach Brown is like starting to understand this, but he's also at the same time like, okay, so if they run a 4-5 pick and roll, a snug pick and roll with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid is probably your best option because there's enough space for Joel Embiid to pop. It's close enough to the basket that Ben Simmons, if you just go under him, he is quick enough against most fours, and especially if they switch, he's quick enough against most fives that you can't just totally drop. You have to like at least show a little bit and not let him get up speed. And because you have JJ Redick and Covington in the opposite corner, like in both corners, and Ben Simmons will find them if they're open and if there's any help. So like, you should just do snug pick and rolls every time down the court, except Joel Embiid's sort of fat and he's 7'3" on top of that. Like, even if Joel Embiid was in good shape, it would be hard for him to just like set screens and like roll every single offensive possession, you know, that would be rough. So Brett Brown on a lot of possessions, I think people, like I'll see people on Twitter being like, what the hell is Brett Brown doing? Like he's got all this ball movement that's like not leading to anything. And he's trying all these weird ways to get guys open that don't involve Joel Embiid directly, just coming up empty. and ending up with like a weird JJ Redick pull up type shit. Like JJ Redick has sort of been asked to do stuff off the dribble a little bit, which is like awful. Like it's really bad. And so where I'm going with all of this is like, you can't run a snug pick and roll 4-5 every single offensive possession. And wouldn't it be awesome if there was a way that you had another player on the court who you could run a like pretty good 2-man game with, Ben Simmons, because like it seems like he has a lot more athleticism, and asking him to do stuff like this is more realistic. That needs to be Markelle Fultz, or the 76ers are just going to kind of be disappointing. Or it doesn't, for this year, it needs to be Markelle Fultz, because next year they have enough cap space that they could like go get Avery Bradley, who's okay, or like LeBron, who would be pretty good.
That'll
stuff
work.
Like that. Yeah, right?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I said that exact same thing in the article I wrote today. Just that snug pick and roll from the elbow set that the Pelicans use at times with Anthony Davis and Boogie, having that built into their offense a little bit more, I think that would be kind of unstoppable. Of course, you can't run it every time. Those two have developed actually pretty good chemistry on pick and rolls. Like Embiid will slip at the right times now. It really puts a lot of pressure on the defense, because you'll have Redick in the weak side corner. So you kind of force help from that weak side defender, and it's an impossible situation. So, and of course, especially with Simmons' ability to pass over the top of the defense, it's going to be really fascinating to monitor. Again, if Fultz doesn't get his shot back, this becomes like almost depressing. Like
yeah,
because that's really his main. Like people are like, yeah, well, he can still do stuff. It's like, sure, and like his best skill is probably his handle, like his best individual skill. But in a vacuum, his most important skill is easily his jump shot. Like that sets up his entire game. This pull up game, getting to his spots. He's not like a great athlete as far as like run and jump explosiveness. He's more of a shifty guy. But if he doesn't have his, like, more importantly for that team construct, if he doesn't have his shot, he can't play off the ball and surround those two other, what we can call at this point franchise cornerstones. It's going to be really fascinating to monitor. I think they completely fucked up that entire situation overall, making him play through that or having him play through that. How that went down is just egregious, man. Like I have no idea what they're thinking. It seems like a really easy problem to avoid. Just let him sit. Don't let him develop any kind of negative muscle memory or anything like that. I just don't understand.
We can wrap up the episode here and we can have a conversation about it, but like I can't, my take involves some like information that I couldn't share on a podcast.
Got it.
So with that, like we can wrap up this episode of Almighty Ballin', which was supposed to be an episode of the Bod Pod, because Cole's going to be on the Bod Pod here in the future. We're very lucky to have him, because he's obviously a smart guy, because this is actually the end of the podcast. And like, you've already listened to the prior part of the show. Cole, thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of our network. Thank you for creating the Stepien so that people have somewhere to go for draft content that isn't shitty like draft on net.
Oh, jeez.
God, now like I'm gonna have to move around so much audio that like I just had that as a throw in, because like I'm gonna cut that, but like I'm already editing, whatever. So Cole, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.